like how cool that was, and like, oh, girls are super cool. So, yeah.
And that's how you knew that girls were super cool?
That's how I found out girls are super cool, and then 28 years later, I acted on it.
It's funny, it was almost the opposite for me. I don't remember playing a lot of games with female protagonists when I was younger. It was mostly dude character. I mean, it still is, to some extent, most of the games I play. It usually doesn't ever bother me. It was actually surprising for me to find myself writing so heavily about gender in a review, because I don't usually write about that. I usually play with guns and things and dude games and stuff, which are labeled that way. It was sort of weird.
And to segue a little bit to another topic, taking off on that, there was sort of an interesting thing, you know, some of us have talked about that we noticed in terms of gender and how, as gamers, we might relate to gender versus being people in the industry. In the industry, 9 times out of 10, when I interact with someone, you know, first they know, I'm Allie, I'm from Harmonix, I work on the design team, blah, blah. When I play games online, usually the first thing that anyone sort of cares about is the fact that I'm a girl, and that's gross, and that's terrible, and that means like I'm a bitch and terrible and cheating. And so there's this...
Naturally.
Well, there are young ears in this audience. So anyway, so one of the things we kind of wanted to talk about with this panel is how do we bridge that gap between the way we relate to things professionally versus the way we all together as this community relate to each other and talk about these things? How do we go from you know, comments in Abbie's reviewer taking something they didn't like and making it that Abbie is speaking for all ladies and all ladies have their time of the month and are angry all the time, to people reframing arguments to addressing Abbie as as a game critic, as another person writing about games?
Yeah, I hate to be hogging the mic, but I have another thought on this. Let me just read my thought that I wrote down. Well, so there's a disparity, right, between the people like Justin and like Abbie and others who write about games, who are super smart people, and there are really, really incredibly well-written pieces out there and websites that crank it out every day, with the average age of a player of a game, right? So there's like your 13 and 14-year-olds that call each other fags on Xbox Live are also reading these incredibly well-written, well-spoken articles and generating these terrible comments in these threads. So something I really wonder about, and I don't know if, sorry, we did a reverse Q&A earlier in my panel, if we could throw it to you guys if you have thoughts, but like, how do we get over this disparity of like, the maturity level of gamers, who obviously you're all of various ages, you're not that 13-year-old boy. How do we keep their voice where it should be? They're allowed to have voices, I'm not saying that, but I think all of you have probably much more well-spoken thoughts than they do, and how can we make those voices heard in discussions like this?
I'm mildly envisioning you as like a cranky old man with a cane right now yelling, "Get off my lawn!
Get off my lawn!
Get off my distractoid!"
Kids, you heard it here.
Yeah. So we can go to you guys standing there if any of you want to address this, or to the audience. Do you feel comfortable? You raised your hand. You want to say something? Yeah. You're out of mic.
What you were just talking about. Just had a brain fart. Sorry.
It's all right. So I've been having them all day. So
yeah. No, I'm just going to stay quiet because I just don't even remember what you're talking about. See? I mentioned it and it's gone from my head, so.
Would you like to cede your turn to this lady up front who has
please.
something to say?
So, why not just ignore them? Remind ourselves they're 13-year-old boys, they're going to say stupid things, they're going to be all over our lawn. Who cares?
That is very much how I feel about it a lot of the time. Chloe, yes. Come on up.
Sorry for lining up. Okay, yeah, about right distance. So I would say that there's two ways to do it. You either GTFO, or you say, come to my community and bring them in and teach them and educate them that, you know what, we all have to live in the same world. We all have to get along, we all have to understand each other, and the more you say, no, 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 I don't want this little 13-year-old child, 7-year-old child, 59-year-old child, and I've dealt with them, you know, the more you say GTFO, the more you turn into them, and the more you put this distance between them and us. How can you possibly have a good relationship with anybody if it's them and us?
Yep.
So I'm in a very large clan. We have no age limit. And we made that decision a very long time ago that said, if you're in our clan and you're under the age of 12, COPA, we do deal with it, your parents have to be involved. And your guardians have to come and talk to us before you are allowed to recruit with us. And we will sit down and explain to you and to your parents and your guardians what we expect. And if you mouth off with us, we are going to sit your ass down, doesn't matter how old you are, and say, your attitude is inappropriate. We don't take it. That's all you can do. So.
I got my own brother kicked out of my clan.
To your point about community, a lot of us up here are community managers, and I think one thing that we've been really proud with at least the Rock Band community, especially over the last few years, is how, for a gaming community, how progressive it is and how much people self-police. And I'm not gonna lie, when I first started there 2 years ago, there were still times where sometimes the language, you know, directed at people was a little bit not nice, not considerate. And we found that the more sort of we reinforced as the dev role models, like, hey, you know, that's not really a cool thing. Like, how would you feel if someone said that to your face or said that to your mom or your sister? That now some of those offenders are actually the ones who sort of self-police everybody. And it's not about making, like, our forums the political correct police. It's just about making it a space where everyone feels like they have equal say and can say it how they want. So I will go back to audience Q&A. So you got your brain unfarted?
Yes.
You got brain Vino?
I was a kid when I grew up half in India, half over here. And I've been called a raghead, I've been called a camel jockey, you know, all those words. I've had my black friends called nigger and all that. But I used to use fag and faggot like every high school kid. And this was an 02 or 01. And I used it in my English honors class. And my teacher just sat there and said, you know, what's the difference between this and this? Fundamentally, as a society, we look at race and we look at gender. And they're connected, unfortunately, but we don't connect them because there's issues that we address with race that we don't address with gender. And that, as they were talking about a community, you have to bridge the gap. You have to show parallels between things. And that's the primary thing that, you know, even with my kid, I have a 4-year-old, and, you know, there's boy roles and girl roles, and I keep trying to inform her that you don't have to just fit in these girl roles. You don't have to play with princesses. You can play with dragons. You don't have to like pink. You can like blue. You can like red. You can like magenta for all I care. You know? But
sir, what are you going to do if your child is colorblind?
I like neon blue, but, you know, thank you.
Cool. I'm just going to interject. It looks like we have a lot of hands in the audience and more people coming up. So if you guys want to jump on mics, we'll try to rapid fire get through everybody and make sure everyone has a chance to speak. And you've been very patient at this microphone for a while, so I will let you have your turn to speak.
So my question's probably going to piss a lot of people off, but I figure that this...
Bring it.
Good start.
So I think it was from your review, but this was the one thing that actually sort of ticked me off a little bit because, I mean, I work as a contractor sometimes. And so I understand that when you go to a site as a contractor, you know, in this case it was like programming or whatnot, but it's like you are supposed to obey the orders of your superior. And so that was the one thing I actually didn't mind was the fact that Samus had to obey the orders of the superior because he was the superior officer on the site. And she was a mercenary, so she was a contractor. And I just thought, well, what if she was a man? Would that have been a problem? Or what if her superior was a woman? Would that have been a problem? Was it basically sexual politics that made people take umbrage of the fact that she was taking orders from someone?
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand your point. I think in the context how everything was framed in the game, I mean, that's just not how it was. And it's very easy to talk about, well, what if it was a different way? What if it? I wish it was, frankly. It would have been great, but it wasn't. And this is what they presented, and this is what I have to deal with as a reviewer. And I do think, I mean, I was trying not to also get into like cultural differences between Japanese games and I was trying not to get into that, but I think there's an element of that there as well. I think it's a little more complicated. I like the what ifs, but that's just not what they did. And I think the way that her character was framed throughout the rest of the game doesn't support the idea of, well, they could have, you know, would have been different if they made it a woman or made it a man, you know, like, or made that dynamic different. That would have been a different game. I might have liked that one. That's a tough question. I definitely see your point, but...
I mean, it just is like, it seems like in certain things, like because of like to be PC and whatnot, you're not allowed, for instance, to have a woman that's subservient to a man for whatever reason, because then they go, oh my God, you know, you're domesticating her. And it's like...
Yeah, but you have to look at everything in its own context. I mean, if you're going to generalize it like that, it's hard to argue. Everything has to be looked at in the context that it's presented, and I think in the context that Metroid presented it, I don't think it was right.
Oh, I think
So
that game
we'll go
lost
to
once
the.
he
I
said
want
confession
to
time.
get a chance to get everybody in, so we'll go to this side of the room now.
Hi. So I just wanted to talk about patriarchy in video games and in our society. So, do you think that our video game industry is essentially a reflection of our patriarchal society? Like for instance, a girl can't get a job unless she wears some nice pumps and a dress to get a job. Like, that's an easy path to power. So do you think it's like the reason why people attack Samus is because she didn't essentially like for instance, we talk about Lara Croft, she has 2 guns, but she has to have the TNA if she wants to be the main character of a game. So do you think Samus is like an important character in gaming because she didn't submit to those sorts of roles? And how do we, as like the gaming public, fight sexism in gaming? Is it our responsibility to like ante up, and how do we fight it?
Can I ask you for a quick clarification? Are you asking specifically about women in their roles in game storylines, or are you asking like whether when I interviewed with John for my job at Harmonix, I walked in high heels and a dress?
No, I mean like how like women in general in society have like lower wages, and it's harder for them to get jobs unless they play to gender roles.
Actually, there was a panel earlier today known as, it was females on female game characters, and they touched on the fact that this industry itself, because there really isn't that much diversity still, you kind of have a similar mindset of, well, this is what works, and this is what sells, so we're going to keep it and we're not going to break the box. But an interesting point they touched on was, I think, the gaming audience is sort of ready for radical changes and different characters. And the problem is the industry itself still doesn't have that diversity in the development team to implement these changes yet. It's still a young industry and it's still growing, and it's kind of like Hollywood back then where, you know, they kind of had very racist and sexist films, but as you had more people joining the industry, they incorporated the diverse ideals and philosophies and matured. And similarly, I think the video game industry is going to have to go through that as well.
Can I ask something related to that? What the shit's up with all the booth babes here? I know that there are like specific rules for them to fit to be here. Right. Yeah, lots of boobs, lots of butts.
Amen.
Booth hugs.
Touched a nerve.
Yeah.
Touched a nerve.
Yeah. So here's my thing.
touched.
A lot of us have been talking about this. I don't ever want there to be a thing where there suddenly becomes like the outfit police at PAX, where everyone's looking at every person who comes in and going like, oh, you can't wear those booty shorts, Eric Pope. That's not acceptable. But
No, I think that's okay.
yeah. But just, and this is just me speaking as a person from my own perspective, the booth babe thing makes me uncomfortable on a number of levels, and one of the things that makes it really difficult is it discredits my presence as a woman developer here at this conference. Just to elaborate a little bit, at PAX Prime we actually had an incident where someone came over to our booth and asked me a question, and he didn't like the answer I gave him, and his response to me was actually, well, I'll wait till the guys who actually work for the studio come back. You're just like the girl helping out, right?
But worse than that, Abbie has been groped at E3.
Yeah.
Just because you're blonde doesn't mean you're a hired booth babe.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, which is the problem with
Also wrong,
the proliferation of them. The more of them they have at these events, the harder it will be for people like Abbie to actually find their legitimate space on the show floor, which is really shitty.
So we'll go back to, I think you've been waiting for quite a while.
A little taller than this thing. There we go. First, I'd just like to say, with chops like those, sir, you can wear anything you want.
Thank you. I will also say I can work booty shorts.
All right, so my question zooms out a little bit and I want to address more the community response issue rather than the specific content of your review. I think in light of this and other recent controversies in the gaming community, we've really seen that gender and sexuality are really hot button issues and get a lot of people, both legitimately and less legitimately, really upset. I mean, we have 13-year-olds on Call of Duty calling each other fag every time they shoot each other. We have people apparently wishing you to die by breast cancer when you write a game review. Gender and sexuality both really seem to get people angry in the gaming community in a way that other issues don't seem to do as much. And I wonder if you guys have any thoughts on why that is, why gender has become so hot.
You know, it's funny, I've been playing games for a very long time, online shooters mostly, and it used to be really anonymous. It was text, and I would play Quake or Doom, you know, like whatever. Nobody ever knew that I was a girl except for the occasions when I would have a really, really awesome streak in Team Fortress, and I'd be like, I'm a girl, beat your ass. And then I would be immediately booted and banned from servers. Yeah, it happened, but now it's weird too. Like I wondered if it was that competitive nature that happens because you know you see it when you're playing online. I get really competitive too, but now I miss the text because I can't hide the fact that I get mistaken for a little kid a lot.
That's common.
And it's tough, but it puts in. I guess a lot of guys aren't comfortable with women being in those, you know, generally male competitive spaces sometimes, and it's tough. I'm cool. I'm not hard to talk to. I wish that we weren't treated like that, and I wonder the same thing that you're wondering a lot. It's like, why is that an initial turnoff? Why is that initially like, oh my God, like there's a girl in the room?
I would. I'm sorry. I was just gonna say I would imagine that not imagine. I know these are two things that are feeding each other. I mean, you look at the game community grows up the moment the games grow up. The moment we look at the portrayal of women in games like Dead or Alive or God of War, that's frankly disgusting. And until we start saying that's not good enough, and until games stop being made for people that think that's good enough, neither goes up. Neither one says,